Hey everybody, this is Gabe Hernandez with Comical Opinions. Wanted to take a break from IDW for once, which I'm sure everybody's happy about, including me. Talk about a new article, a new announcement that came out from Mad Cave Studios. They're a smaller publisher. They do monthly comics, and they have a number of different titles that kind of run the gamut for different types of genres within their comics. But The reason I'm picking this one up, and I thought it was kind of interesting, is because this is sort of chronicles an upward trend within comics publishers of shifting, or at least dedicating a significant amount of focus towards the YA market, the YA graphic novel market, basically giving Scholastic a run for their money. How successful they will be, time will tell. But this is just yet another announcement from yet another publisher talking in that space. And I wanted to kind of go over the announcement a little bit, take a look at the titles, kind of look at where they match up against the monthly comics that they publish on a regular basis, including what's out this week, and kind of see if that looks like it's going to hit the mark as far as where the juxtaposition between on-ramping younger readers and moving them into mature or lifelong customers, does that really match up? I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but let's give it a shot. Okay, so again, this is from ICV2, and they have a lot of good articles. So definitely would recommend you sub to their newsletter and take a look at their website, because they do have a lot of good, very level-headed, very even stuff. So Mad Cave Studios announces a YA graphic novel imprint and first titles. So joining the growing number of comics publishers that are pivoting to graphic novels for younger readers, as I've just said, Mad Cave Studios will launch Maverick, a young adult graphic novel imprint. So basically, these books will be published under the Maverick label. They won't say Mad Cave, they'll say Maverick. So that's sort of their way of separating these books from what they would normally publish on a monthly basis in their regular monthly copies, the direct market. It goes live in fall 2021. The company announced new titles will be released bi-monthly, with 5 titles announced at launch. Let's take a look at some of the titles. Nightmare in Savannah, written by Leela Gwen, with art by Rowan McCall, that tells the story of a teenager moving to Savannah where her parents are sent to jail, joining a group of outsiders to develop an ancient fae power flowing through their veins. So this is sort of low fantasy, maybe Southern Charm type material, definitely geared at young adult, maybe teens. It looks like it's very female focused, just from the artwork and from the context, sort of aiming at the Sabrina the Teenage Witch crowd. World Class, written by Jay Sandlin, who I've interacted with, and I've interviewed his Hellfire Quinn books. So he's a good writer. He's got some good stuff. So I definitely would recommend you check him out. Written by Jay Sandlin, with art by Patrick Mulholland, colors by Rebecca Nolte. Skipping down a little bit. Okay, it's about a young soccer player going to an elite prep school in London and the challenges and help he finds there. So it's very sort of, I would say 90210-ish, I guess, talking about high school life, middle school life, a little bit of sports flavor in there as well. Needle and Thread, written by David Pinkney, with art by, and I apologize if I say this wrong, Anun Anayurov, featuring teenagers who use cosplay to be themselves in the face of expectations due to their backgrounds and families. So this is, I guess, sort of, again, in that young adult range, where they're talking about kids expressing themselves, finding out who they are through fashion. Even though we were talking about cosplay, I think that would be an offshoot of fashion. So we'll see how that goes. Good Game, Well Played, written by Rachel Smith, with art by Catherine Lobo. Follows a teenager with a summer job in a video game store who joins with her friends to try to save the story, I guess, I think they meant to say store from a greedy landlord. So that seems more like, to be honest with you, that sounds a lot like one of those 1980s let's come together to save the community center type books. 1980s, sort of films that everybody's used to, John Hughes-ish type stuff, and because it's set in the video game arcade, you're definitely going after sort of the geek, nerdy video game crowd, or gamer crowd. Of Her Own Design, written by Bertie Willis, with art by Jess Taylor and colors by Stephanie Palladino, tells the story of a 16-year-old who encounters a magical pen that causes her story to come to life. Again, sort of low fantasy, I think focused on young adult female. perhaps, depending on the way this is worded. Maverick is a well-traveled name for comic imprints. The Dark Horse Maverick imprint for creator-owned artwork ran from 99 to 2003, and Virgin Comics Maverick imprint also for creator-owned material. Okay, we'll skip the rest of that. So what do I get out of this? So they're definitely focusing on YA. This is not for little kids. This is not, kids who are interested in like Pokemon type stuff. This skews a little bit older. So we're talking about, say, 11, 12, 13-year-olds. Most of these, just from the descriptions of the stories, they're kind of either in slice of life drama type stuff, but nothing too heavy, low fantasy stuff. I would say probably just from the descriptions, this definitely skews female, just from the perspective of, there's not a lot of action going on here. There's not, there's no superpowers, there's no fights, there's no explosions, there's no rough and tumble. So I would say it's fair to say this probably skews very, very female. And if that's what they're going for, that's fine. There's no problem with that at all. Just kind of putting that out there, that if you're kind of thinking about, is this good for my kids, where does this tend to skew? Just based on the descriptions, that's probably where it lands. Now, one of the things that we've talked about in recent videos is, and this really goes back to exactly recently, the Jerry Conway Twitter thread talking about onboarding new readers and how they get to become long-term readers, where Jerry's thread was really focusing on cutting the lines and making them, I won't say less mature, but just less dark and less serious, and really focusing on what kids like. Which I agree with to an extent. Where we disagreed is it shouldn't be an either or. You should do both. And I very much am in favor of the manga model, where you have different levels of manga that appeal to different generations. The difference primarily be something like Shonen or Shonen Jump versus Seinen, and how that skews older and more mature, and just more adult type content, adult in the maturity sense. And here, what we see is that you're skewing maybe not little kid, but you're definitely skewing towards the tweens, young teenagers, or maybe a little bit younger than that. Definitely looks like it's tending or leaning or trending female, and all good. The question is, how does this now tie in? If we're following that manga model, how does this sort of flow them upward as this age range of readers get interested into the comic books, which might be the older the stuff, the more mature stuff, the higher adult stuff, as you will. So let's take a look at what Mad Cave offers on the monthly comic scene, and let's see if we can find some kind of connection. So if we take a look at the latest releases, you've got Hellfire Quinn. That's also Jay Sandlin. I've reviewed those books, not all of them, but most of the series, and it's a good read. It's a good read. The art I'm not a fan of, but overall it's good. Actually, it's not. I think it's a little bit higher. It's not quite high fantasy. It's not quite low fantasy. Sort of in between, with an urban twist to it. So that's okay. Dryfoot, I'm not familiar with. I mean, I've heard of it. I know a little bit about it, but I haven't really done anything with it. Space Adventure with Stargazers. Woven Heart is, how do I describe Woven Heart? Time traveling monster hunters that include vampires, werewolves, and all kinds of things. It's very very much into the horror, but it has a sci-fi twist to it, and I'm trying to think of what it reminds me of. Sort of I want to say there's a sort of a Buffy the Vampire type feel to it, where you have this underground, not an underground, but sort of an agency or world organizations, and they have hunters, and they're fighting monsters throughout time and space. But it's not quite so Joss Whedon-ish in their language and tone. Savage Bastards, I don't know. Over the Ropes, I have read. That's also Jay Sandlin. So Jay Sandlin seems to be a very consistent writer for Mad Cave. And this is, it's a wrestling story, but with some dramatic flair to it. I mentioned to Jay that I thought this sort of had a take, or had a very similar tone, or reminded me a lot of telenovelas, which are like those Spanish language Mexican type soap operas that are really over the top and really almost hyper exaggerated in their dramatic goings on in the story. When I asked him that question, he said no, he'd never even seen those, so he didn't know. But I definitely get that flavor from it. So it's wrestling, but it's the sort of the back scene or behind the scenes drama of it, and it's super almost soap opera ish, but in a telenovela kind of way where it's just got like crazy stuff that's happening. So interesting reads. But if you look at it, this is what they're offering. That's it for the latest releases this month or this week. And if you look at pre-orders, there's Villainous and Terminal Punks. I'm slightly aware of Villainous, a little bit of Terminal Punks, but you can see that their bench strength is not really deep as far as they're not like a Marvel or DC where they're publishing 20, 30 books a month by any stretch. It's more like, as you can see, more like 5 or 6. Then the second question is, if the titles that they're putting out for the young adult novel type material that's coming out next year, if somebody's reading these, how do they, as they grow older and they become a more mature reader and a more experienced reader, how do they dovetail into these? I don't have an answer to that because I'm looking at these titles and some of them I've read and some of them I'm familiar with. Battle Cats. If I was going to recommend at least 2 of the comics that Mad Cave puts out, I would definitely take a look at Woven Heart if you like that sort of horror, but within a government agency type feel, with hunters that are hunting monsters throughout time and space. The other one I would take a look at is Battle Cats. And the reason I bring that one up is because if you were, like I was, horrified, and I don't mean that as an understatement, I mean horrified at the abomination that is Thundercats Roar, that recently came out on Cartoon Network, at the absolute devastatingly bad updated take on the Thundercats mythology. This is your palate cleanser. Battle Cats is your palate cleanser. It's kind of high fantasy. It's a lot of different animals. Most of them are cats, and it's armor, it's sword and sorcery. There's some magic. There's alternate floating islands and all kinds of stuff going on, and it's basically talking cats. So if you liked Thundercats, you will like Battle Cats. So if you miss Thundercats because of that horrid abomination that was Thundercats Roar, give Battle Cats a look. I think you might like that one. Woven Heart, again, if you like vampires and sort of the clandestine secret British agencies that hire hunters to track them down, that's interesting for you. You like telenovelas, check out Over the Ropes. Hellfire Quinn, they just wrapped up the arc, but you can get the back issues. This is sort of like tribes in a battle royale for the right to own the territories, but it's set in New York City, but an alternate New York City, I think, if I remember correctly. It's been a little while. But again, going back to the original question, sorry, that was a little off track, but going back to the original question. So how do these dovetail into these? And the answer is, I don't know. And I don't think that they do for the most part. Because these definitely skew towards a different kind of audience. So I don't see somebody who would be interested in YA novel series about cosplayers that are trying to find acceptance within their social group moving over to any of these titles. There might be, and I just don't know. I'm posing that question. So, but here again is where we are at. We have another publisher that recognizes that the YA graphic novel market is huge. It's exploding. It's basically consumed everything that you hear that's good about the growth of the comic industry. That's where it's at. It's YA graphic novels. The monthly stuff like Marvel, DC, Image, whatever, doesn't even come close. Doesn't even touch it. It's not even in the same ballpark. So when when the latest writer of, I don't know, Aquaman, I'm just picking something at random, tells you the comic industry is doing just fine. Look at the Comic-Con numbers. That's unfortunately, that's just a willful misinterpretation, and that's unfortunate. But that's okay. That's why you come to this channel, because I try to give you the best straight scoop that I can, and we can talk about it. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. Mad Cave Studios announcing a YA graphic novel print. They're definitely putting out some interesting books that skew towards that YA market. Just from their descriptions, I say that skews female, but that's not necessarily the case. It's just up to you, what you like, and that's fine. Or either way, the outstanding question, though, in my mind is if you're taking that approach where you develop and you foster a relationship with YA readers with the intention that as they grow out of these types of materials and they grow into a slightly older market, say older teens to young adult, or young adult in the late teens to 20s, and you want to get them into comics by bringing them along within your brand, how do they transition from here to here? The answer is I don't know, and it doesn't look like it's set up to do that. Maybe it is and I'm missing it, or it's not obvious. Maybe these lineup titles will change over time to match, to kind of give you a transition point from one to the other, but I think that's what's missing. I'm missing publishers that are announcing their foray into the YA graphic novel market, but they're sort of addressing them as completely separate markets that have no obvious or clear path to transition from one to the other. I'm missing that strategy. Manga does that really well. Manga's been doing that for years, and manga outsells the Western comic market by magnitudes. I would love to see publishers look at that a little bit more closely. But that's just me. Anyway, that's my opinion for the day. Again, this is. I hope this was helpful. I hope this was interesting. Looking to continue to make these videos as long as you're willing to stick in with me. If you haven't already, please click on the link down below in the description for the Comical Opinions newsletter. I'm working on new publications all the time, new newsletters all the time. I've got some interesting doozies in there if you're interested in getting some in-depth information about particular topics. I think the next one I'm going to write is related to Batman and why so many writers kind of miss the mark on who Batman is, because I think they just don't understand what makes Batman tick. And I think I'm going to put together a little article that, it may not be so little, talks about what makes Batman tick in a way that I think everyone can understand. And if more readers paid attention to that, I think you'd get a better quality story. Okay, so that's it. That's very much thank you for your time. This is Gabe Hernandez for Comical Opinions. And please link, share, comment, subscribe, and you have a great day. Thank you.